It's week 15. Hope everyone who had a win-in scenario last week made it into the playoffs successfully. If you're in the playoffs, comment down below so I know that I'm talking to an absolute real one about fantasy football. In this video, I'm going to go over waiver wire and must-start matchups and players this weekend. I usually separate the two videos, but this week I'm going to make it into one. We'll talk about a little bit later why I'm going to do that, but more importantly, just not too many waiver wire names that should be picked up at this point. But let's roll the intro. The biggest name we should be adding off of the waiver wire this week is Adam Thielen of the Carolina Panthers. And what makes this such a great add is that this week he's going to play the Dallas Cowboys. That's 20th in fewest fantasy points allowed to the wide receiver position. Follow that up with Tampa Bay, that has been one of the worst at stopping wide receivers in terms of scoring fantasy points. So your championship round, you're going to have a great matchup and a great opportunity to play him as long as his target share continues to stay where it is. Thielen has seen over 10 targets a game in his last 2 games. That may not be sustainable, but he's clearly a top option, a top receiving threat in the Panthers offense. Next, we'll just talk about it briefly. Spoke about his name last week. That's Sincere McCormick, who has run away with the Raiders' backfield as we predicted last week. Sincere McCormick has taken the job away from Alexander Mattison, so even if he's healthy next week, I would consider dropping him. I don't really think there's really much use for somebody like him who is an inefficient runner and isn't going to get all the touches in the backfield. Now, we were kind of playing him for that touchdown and the volume upside, but that's kind of gone now. If you need a tight end to start in the playoffs, Juwan Johnson is a great add off the waiver wire. Given the tight end position this season has been so hit or miss, Juwan Johnson's 6 targets per game over the last 2 games is reliable enough that we need to trust him. He may not get the touchdown every week, but he's getting the volume. And let's not forget, if you're a team that needs to keep winning in the playoffs to stay alive, which we all are as long as we're a playoff team, you have great matchups going forward for Juwan Johnson. You have the Washington Commanders, the Green Bay Packers, and the Vegas Raiders. Those are all 3 really solid matchups that we could take advantage for, so as long as you're able to grab Juwan Johnson off waivers. And finally, for waiver wire names, Tank Bigsby is the running back that sticks out this week. I would not invest in Patrick Taylor Jr. It seems like Isaac Guerendo is going to be just fine. Of course, if you need an insurance policy, then yeah, you could go take Patrick Taylor Jr. But if you're looking for somebody that has more of a chance to be startable in the future, not saying that Tank Bigsby should be started this week, but Tank Bigsby is that player that could potentially be a starter for your team going down the road. Of course, it's the playoffs. We don't have a long road to go anymore. That's kind of nearing the end of the season, especially if you're somebody that loses this week, then your season's over. It's better to take a chance on somebody like Tank Bigsby than getting your insurance policy. That's just my opinion. Now let's go over some of the must-start players this week. Starting with the running back position, he's coming off of back-to-back 100-yard games from the first 12 weeks of the season, had 0 games of running for 100 yards or more. That is Rico Dowdle of the Dallas Cowboys, and he must be in your lineups this weekend. Dowdle is going up against the Carolina Panthers, who give up the 3rd most fantasy points allowed to the running back position. It's very likely Dallas feeds the hot hand, and that means Rico Dowdle is going to get his 20-plus touches like he has over the last 2 weeks. The next running back that must be in your lineups this weekend is Brian Robinson Jr. of the Washington Commanders, who also has a phenomenal matchup this weekend. The Commanders are playing the New Orleans Saints, and the Saints give up the 2nd most fantasy points allowed to the running back position. You have Brian Robinson. You've had him in and out of your lineups this season. Maybe it's because of injuries. Maybe it's because you have somebody better. I would look to play Brian Robinson Jr. and make sure he's locked into your lineup. Moving on to wide receivers. The first wide receiver that must be started this week is Jerry Jeudy, who's going up against the Kansas City Chiefs. Jerry Jeudy matched up against the Kansas City defense. The Chiefs defense gives up the 9th most fantasy points allowed to wide receivers. Jeudy, since the bye week, has scored a touchdown in 3 out of the Browns' 4 games. He's seen no less than 6 targets, and it's very obvious that he's the top wide receiver in terms of who's going to play the most snaps. Jerry Jeudy is now not coming off the field for the Browns. He's clocked over 90% snap count in each of his last 2 games. The production he was getting doing is not an anomaly. He's going to continue to keep this trend going forward. Jerry Jeudy is a must-start wide receiver, and dare I say he's a top 15, top 20 option for the rest of this playoff run. The next wide receiver we must be starting is Quentin Johnston of the LA Chargers, which I know sounds crazy, but the matchup this week is too good to pass up. After an abysmal game from the Raiders wide receiver group, I've said that those guys were must-starts. With Trey Tucker's stinker of a game and Jacoby Myers failing to land in the end zone last week, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers now give up the second most fantasy points allowed to wide receivers. Compared to going into the week, they were number 1 in that category. I would be willing to bet that a duo like Ladd McConkey and Quentin Johnston can kind of push Tampa Bay's defense back to number 1 fantasy points allowed to wide receivers, and that's why Quentin Johnston's going to make this must-start list. And if Ladd McConkey is going to miss time or some kind of limited snap count again, then this only further pushes the idea of making Quentin Johnston a must-start player. Finally, let's talk some quarterbacks. I truly believe that this is the get-right game for Kyler Murray. After having 2 stinker weeks back-to-back, and everybody clowning him, everybody making those memes about him, this is the get-right game against the New England Patriots. It has to happen. The New England Patriots give up the 8th most fantasy points allowed to the quarterback position, so if there's any week that could be a get-right week for Kyler Murray, it's this one. Another quarterback that should be started just based off of matchup is Justin Herbert. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers give up the most fantasy points allowed to quarterbacks, and we just saw Aiden O'Connell shred them as, Aiden O'Connell was one of those guys in the playoff video. So those are my must-start matchups for this week. Those are my must-add waiver wire players. I know I usually make 2 videos about this kind of stuff. I had to make it 1 this week. Really sorry about that, but I did hurt myself. It's very uncomfortable for me to sit in this chair and record, unfortunately, but I had to stick it out. I had to do what I had to do for Outlier Militia, and that's why I'm here making this video today. If you like this video, please make sure to drop a like for your boy. Definitely make me feel a little bit better as I'm going through something right now. And if you're new to the channel and you like fantasy football content, hitting that subscribe button definitely wouldn't hurt either. But that's all I have for you guys today. Thank you so much for watching. Outlier Militia, thank you for supporting this channel the way you do. But my name is Turtle. This is Outlier Fantasy, and I will see you in the next video.